Live on Cosi Talks. So I have another friend in the Cosi Talks hot seat tonight. With me is Larry Borowski, editor of Amplitude Magazine. Say hi, Larry.
Good evening, everybody. Hello.
All right, so we're going to wait for you guys to jump on board. We have so much fun stuff to talk about. I have been waiting for this talk for a really long time. We're going to be talking about the Paralympics tonight. And guys, if you were watching my little earlier promo from today, I actually put this out on my personal page as well. Usually my talks are obviously structured more for the amputee and the limb loss community. But for me, Paralympics, we need to make it truly a global event to celebrate. Hey, Brian's on board. We got K's. We got a lot of people popping on board real quick, guys. Don't be shy. Let me know who you are, where you're from, and more importantly, what's in your drink tonight. Larry, what you got?
I'm just saying, I see Brian. He's someone I've talked to. I'm glad to see him in there. He pinged me on Facebook earlier today. How you doing, Brian?
Yes, and he's got his.
I know what Brian will be doing tomorrow. He'll be walking up a lighthouse tomorrow morning.
Oh boy! Oh my!
Yeah,
that's a lot of steps.
Yeah, 228 of them.
I've done that once in my life, and once was enough. That was good. That was good. Been there, did that, got the t-shirt. We got Lynette on board. What's up, comadre? Bonnie's on board. Bonnie, how you been feeling lately? We got William. Guys, if you're watching the replay, throw replay into the comments section for me because it allows me to see who's obviously watching the replay and if there's any questions that I need to get back to after that. We've got Linda. Kenny, what's up? She's in Virginia with her beach rum and Coke. That sounds really good, Kenny. That sounds amazing. We've got Linda from New York. All right. Brian says, yes, sir, 228. Whew. Hope you got the ice packs waiting for after that. So guys, while we're waiting for a couple more people to jump on board, who watched the opening ceremonies for the Paralympics? Cosi poll, first Cosi poll of the night. We got Johnny V in the Cosi Talks house. What's up? Hey, Diana, glad you could join us this evening. Show of hands, guys. How many of you were able to catch either watching the opening ceremonies live or watching the replay of it? Hey, Debbie from St. Pete. What's up, Doug? Glad you could make it this evening. So I was watching it this morning. I was like waiting for the kids to go to school so I could just sit down and watch it with my coffee. It was amazing. Got to see Team USA come in. Bonnie was watching it. Awesome. All right. Charles from Amarillo, Texas. Heat. Hey, Charles, I haven't seen you here in a while. I'm glad you could join us. Yes, I heard the rugby was going on, Brian, and I heard it was really intense. It was really intense. All right, guys. We're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you joining me for the first time, welcome. My name is Cosi Belloso. I'm a physical therapist, amputee specialist here in Tampa, Florida. I've been a PT now for over 18 years, and my passion is working with the limb loss community. Tonight with me, I have Larry Borowski, who is joining me from Amplitude Magazine. So I'm going to let Larry introduce himself a little bit more.
Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. We're admirers of your show. Cosi's been in our magazine. For those of you who don't know Amplitude, we are a national lifestyle publication for the limb loss community based in Denver, Colorado. And we go out all over the country. We cover everything from sports to travel to clothing to medical related issues to, film and TV, anything related to limb loss that's out there. And we try to be both a resource to inform people as well as just, kind of a barometer on how the culture is changing for amputees, how the broader culture is perceiving amputees and where that integration is. And so the Paralympics is a really big focus of ours because so much of the country is focused on these games. And this is a really big year for the Paralympics, and Cosi and I'll get into that. But we feel like it's a fantastic opportunity for some of the athletes to be ambassadors for the limb loss community and to sort of represent the community to the broader public. So we'll get into some of that. But at any rate, really glad to be here. Thanks again for inviting me, Cosi. Appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Guys, I've been a huge fan ever since I opened up my clinic and I started becoming more involved in the community at large. Amplitude Magazine is definitely a publication I always look forward to seeing in the mailbox. And the kids know to bring it to me right away. They're like, it's the magazine that you've been wanting to read. So thank you for sharing. And guys, it was just one of those things where Larry and I were having a conversation and I had mentioned to him how much I wanted to do something special for the Paralympics. And he said, obviously, the magazine had been doing a lot of things special with the Paralympics. If you're not already a subscriber, and we're going to be mentioning this several times throughout tonight, If you're not already a subscriber, Larry, what can they do?
If you're not a subscriber, go to our website. And Cosi, I'm like, can't figure out how to post on the chat, doggone it. Can you give me a live lesson while we're here?
Yes. If you look, hopefully your screen looks similar to mine. If you look on the right side on the bottom, you'll see a type a message.
I don't see that. I don't
okay.
type a message.
You know what? Is it www dot?
No, it's just HTTPS.
Uh-huh.
And then studio, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
So, but I don't see the type of message down at the bottom.
Okay.
Let me go full screen and just see if I see it. Nope, don't see it there.
All right. Guys, I will be posting. If any of you have that link, if you can help us out, that'd be lovely. If you have the link to the Amplitude website.
I'll just give it to you verbally. It's not that hard. It's
all right.
www.livingwithamplitude.com. That's our website. Okay. So Living with Amplitude, AMPLITUDE. There you go. Thank you, Cosi. Appreciate that. And we publish 6 times a year. So we publish every other month, but we refresh our website at least once a week with fresh content for our weekly newsletter. And during the Paralympics, we're doing a daily blog with all kinds of content and fun and games.
Sounds good. We got Pat here on board watching the Paralympic basketball in the background. We were just talking about that. It's what, about 8:30, 9:30 in the morning over in Tokyo right now. So they're getting started with all the fun. Bobby, thank you for posting that. And thank you, Johnny, for posting that. Really appreciate it. Hey, Harsh.
Appreciate that. And all Johnny, right. I did see your question. I'll try to see if I can chat you up privately.
Yes.
Johnny
yes.
Rocco. Okay.
And guys, if you've had any problems getting a publication or subscription, feel free to message me. I answer all of my messages within 2 business days, and we'll make sure we get that fixed for you. Hey, Harsh, so glad you could join us this evening. So guys, tonight we're going to talk about not just, the Paralympics at large, a little bit about the history and a little bit about how they work, because it is a little bit different, obviously, from the common Olympics that we just finished right now. All right. So when I was kind of just reading a little bit on it, and we'll try to see if we can't get these links up there on the Paralympic website itself, there were actually whispers of Paralympic sports or of adaptive sports dating back as far as 1888. But when things really started picking up was around World War II, because they had the veterans, right? And a gentleman, let me see if I get this man's name right, because he deserves this, Dr. Ludwig Guttmann, okay? He was the one who created basically the first Paralympic Games, and he did it in London to coincide with the 1948 Olympic Games. Okay, so Dr. Guttmann basically got together a group of about 23 athletes who were veterans, both men and women, and they did archery. That was the very first Paralympic sport. It wasn't called the Paralympics back then. Back then, they called it the International Stoke Mandeville Games, okay? So there's just a little bit of a useless Jeopardy factoid out there for you, okay? So with the course of time, they started kind of picking up things, and they started, several organizations were created. There was kind of an organization for cerebral palsy. There was an organization for those who were visually impaired, okay? The Paralympics, as we know it now, really started kind of gelling in 1960, right? And this was in Rome. This is when it started in Rome, Italy in 1960, and it featured 400 athletes from 23 countries. So I didn't realize it dated that far back.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the military thing. The 1948 Paralympics were the first Paralympics since 1936, the Berlin Games, because World War II canceled the Olympics in 1940 and 1944. So 1948 was this renewal of international athletics, and Dr. Guttmann was a neurologist who was treating at that hospital called Stoke Mandeville. That's where the games were named. It was Stoke Mandeville Hospital. He had a clinic there to deal with veterans who had incurred spinal injuries during the war. And he found that keeping people active was really good for their mental health. It was good for their physical health. The prospects in those days for people with a disability, a physical disability such as paraplegia, were not really very good. And so, that military connection has really stayed through with the Paralympics all the way, especially in the United States. And so it's sort of I'm glad you brought that up, because even today, a good chunk of the U.S. Paralympic team are people with military background.
No, and it was beautiful. Watching, I was, going through the Peacock streaming app, which, guys, by the way, NBC has theirs. We're going to talk about where you can watch it. But one of the places you can catch some of the goodies is on the NBC Peacock app, streaming app. And I was watching the story just on Melissa Stockwell, our triathlete. What a beautiful story. She wanted to serve her country in the military. That was a dream that she had when she was very young. She served in the military, lost her leg in an IED explosion while she was abroad in Iraq, came back and became this phenomenal triathlete. And she was just talking about how she was serving her country in a different way. And it was a different battlefield, so a different place for the countries to come together. And it just, I come from a military background, so that always holds a soft spot for me as well. And we've had folks like John Register on the show, where he told his story about training for the Olympics with the Army, having his injury, losing his leg, and then becoming a Paralympian. Yeah.
And Melissa and John, there's a direct connection between those two. Melissa entered the program that John set up to funnel military veterans into Paralympic training. So
I did not know that. That's amazing.
Yeah. No, there's a real community here, and there's really a sort of a chain of inheritance almost. And so, and Melissa was the flag bearer. She was one of two flag bearers the other night. Now, I have a hard time keeping which night is which straight, because it's already it's Thursday now in Tokyo, right?
Yep.
And the opening ceremonies were Tuesday night.
Yes.
Yeah, they were Tuesday night in Tokyo, Tuesday morning here in the States. Anyway, I'll try to keep track of it, but it's very difficult, especially at my age.
Yeah. So we got Carolyn. Carolyn, thank you so much for subscribing to the magazine. And guys, if you haven't already done so, do a right click, subscribe to Living with Amplitude. Really a wonderful publication.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Carolyn. Really glad to have you with us.
Thank you. So guys, 1960, big, kind of coming out party for the Paralympics. 1976 is when we had our first winter Paralympics in Sweden, right? The first winter games. Okay. So what's interesting is, the Paralympics have a lot of, the word para is Greek. It comes from the Greek word of alongside. Okay. So they named it the Paralympics to show that it was in parallel with the Olympics. Okay. Now, one thing, and I was mentioning this story to Larry, I think what we're seeing this year is just an explosion of exposure and media, finally, that the Paralympics so richly deserve. It wasn't until, what was the year? 1988 in Seoul and the 1992 Alberta Winter Olympics that the Paralympics and the Olympics were hosted in the same place. And I think that's where we started seeing and learning more. So the story I was telling Larry is in the 1996, it was Atlanta Games, right? I was actually that summer taking my very first trip with my family to go to Europe. It was my first trip outside of the United States. So exciting. And then coming back, going through the Atlanta airport, seeing all the advertisement for the Olympics. And at that moment, they were welcoming the Paralympians to the airport. So I was about 17 years old at the time going, what is this? That was my first exposure to, this is the Paralympics. This is what it is. These are the athletes. And
at that time, the 1990s, it was still a very, very tiny audience for the Paralympics. It's grown so big now. This is something I want to make sure people understand.
Yeah.
Globally, this event is almost as much viewership as the Olympics themselves. In fact, globally, the Paralympics are the third most heavily watched televised sporting event in the world. The only bigger ones are the Olympics and the World Cup, Football World Cup, right?
Yeah.
Soccer World Cup.
Yeah.
The United States is sort of slow on the uptake to catch on to the Paralympics being great watching. But this year is a banner year. NBC and its sponsors are really expanding the coverage way beyond anything we've ever gotten in the United States. So it's a really exciting year to be a fan of these athletes and these sports. But yeah, 1996, outside of Atlanta, or even people who lived in Atlanta, I bet the majority of people didn't even know the games were going on at that time.
Yeah. And so everybody that I talk to, I'm just like, go watch it. If we can just flood and they'll get all the statistics of all the people in the United States watching it, hopefully we'll get even more coverage as the years come along.
Yeah.
We have some beautiful superstars we're going to be talking about tonight. So guys, when I looked at the list of the sports, because I was like, oh, let me talk a little bit about each one of the sports. And then I saw the list and I go, yeah, we're going to have to adjust that because it's a lot. Guys, we're talking archery. Obviously, that was the original Paralympic sport. Badminton, ballroom dancing, canoeing, cycling, equestrian, judo, powerlifting, volleyball, swimming. And I'm reading off a list here and I'm running out of breath. Guys, so many. Rugby, we mentioned rugby, basketball, wheelchair basketball is going on tonight. And it's just amazing to see everybody coming to this. So we're going to talk about the top three, or at least, I picked what I thought were the top three. We're going to talk about archery tonight, guys. We're going to talk about track and field and swimming. And so for me, archery, just because it was the original one, and I also happen to think archery is really cool. So as I was kind of reading a little bit more up on archery, it's the original sport, as we all heard, from the Paralympic Games. And as Larry mentioned, it was mainly meant for those with spinal cord injuries who were wheelchair bound. So the main difference that you'll see, and this is where I like to really compare, and this is my physical therapy brain, is what is the difference between a Paralympic athlete in archery and an Olympic athlete in archery? So one of the biggest differences is their ability to stand or sit, depending on the impairment. They have the ability to sit and do it from a wheelchair, or stand and possibly lean on a type of stand. And then the other part is the bow. So in the Paralympics, they'll use what's called a recurve bow, and they can also use a compound bow. So those are kind of like the two big differences between the Paralympic sport and the Olympic sport. Hey, Patrick, glad you could make it this evening. Larry, do you want to add anything to that one?
Well, there's a couple things that just jump to mind. I know that archery is what I will call, for many people, a gateway sport. Not to be confused with a gateway drug or anything like that, but it is a gateway sport in that it's really very easy to get involved. In most cases, you can rent or borrow equipment. You don't have to have a lot of endurance or stamina. You can, do it whether seated or standing, whatever you want. But the main thing is that it immerses you in the community with a lot of other people who share, your disability, or who, are just out there to have a good time. So when I've spoken with people like from Angel City Sports or from Move United or some of the adaptive sports organizations, there are people who aren't confident enough to go out and run on a track, right? Or maybe they don't have a running blade and they can't. Maybe they don't feel up to getting in a pool and swimming, or, they don't want to play wheelchair rugby and, knock heads with, a bunch of other people. But archery is something that a lot of people can do. So I think, it is kind of, again, it's fitting that was the very first sport in the Paralympic history. And so for anyone who's looking for a way to get involved and maybe get out there, and if you don't feel like you're, you identify as an athlete, or you don't have the confidence to try something that's, too strenuous, give archery a shot. It's a lot of fun. I've done it myself.
It is.
I don't know if this is a time to talk about some of the amazing archers that you can watch.
Yes.
The two I'm most familiar with, I'll let you talk about Zara, because I think you know her story better. There's two American archers that are competing this year who are both noteworthy in a couple different ways. One of them is, let's start with Matt Stutzman, because many of you may already have heard of him. He's famous as the armless archer. Okay, this is a congenital bilateral upper limb amputee, born with no arms, so above the elbow, congenital amputee, and he learned first to shoot a gun as a kid. Grew up in a hunting family, and then took up archery, and he shoots with his feet. He uses his chin and his mouth to pull back the string, and he steadies his bow with his feet. And he's one of the greatest archers of any type, whether able-bodied or para, of all time. He actually is in the Guinness Book of World Records with the longest distance for a bullseye of any archer ever. So we got to root for him because he's never won a Paralympic gold medal. In 2012, he won the silver, and in the finals, he duked it out with another person. And if you, I hope some of you will watch because there's scoring systems, and it's a little bit like curling in that there are sort of rounds or innings with archery, and so there's a lot of strategy involved. At any rate, long story short, he lost by a few points, and then in 2016 in Rio, he got knocked out before even the podium round, so he didn't even win any medals at all. But the person who knocked him out, Matt had the second highest score of anyone in the entire Paralympics. The only guy who scored higher was that one guy in that one match against him. So he had the second highest score of all, but he just got unlucky. The other guy was red hot. And so at any rate, Matt is now at his third Paralympics. Still looking for that first gold medal. So
apparently he also builds and drives race cars, according to Chris, who just chimed in right there. So that's
really fantastic individual.
And if you guys saw the Netflix documentary Rising Phoenix, he was featured in that one as well. So we've got lots of superstars. The other two, which I was fascinated reading about, there was a section, I believe, on the Paralympic website, and it was obviously the people to watch. So in the Paralympic website, guys, you can look it up by each sport, and within each sport, it tells you who to watch, which is kind of nice. All nice and convenient, good reading right there. Zara Nemati. So she caught my attention. She was she is Iran's first gold medalist at either Paralympics or Olympics. And she took, Olympic gold. And I'm reading here just to make sure I got the right location, in London in 2012. And then she went to qualify for both the Olympics and the Paralympics, both. And she went to Rio 4 years later, where she defended her Olympic title. Okay. And now she's coming back. So she is the current defending champion. And at her heels, I think, is going to be Emma Rose Ravish, correct? From USA? Emma?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Emma Rose is extremely young. She's just turned 21.
Yes.
But she kind of broke out as a teenager before the pandemic in about 2017, 2018. Mm-hmm. She kind of came out of nowhere, and within one tournament, she got her International Paralympic Committee classification rating. We'll talk about that in a little bit. She got her classification rating, qualified for Team USA, and she qualified for the world's. It was this her very first tournament, her very first competition as a teenager. She is a congenital bilateral lower limb amputee. Okay. She shoots from a wheelchair, and she is already considered the best woman recurve,
archer in history,
in U.S. history. No woman ever has accomplished what she's done in just a short period of time. So she's kind of a star on the rise.
Yes.
And also someone, if you like archery or if you're curious about it, she's definitely someone to watch.
And Jody, she is from Iran, from the country Iran. So just to clarify that for you. Guys, many of you are asking, where can you watch? We're going to get more into details, but just as a quick thing, I have found that the NBC Peacock app on my phone has been very helpful, as well as the streaming app, the Peacock streaming app. That's where I've because I don't have cable anymore, so that's where I watch.
Cosi, I've got something down here that says private chat.
Nope, that's just for me.
Okay, well, so I sent you a link, which I'll and maybe you can share it in the chat. And I'm sorry, folks, I can't seem to access it.
No worries, I got your back.
NBCOlympics.com. Okay, so if you go to NBC, there you go. If you go to that link, it's really helpful because you can stream any live event there at whatever hour. Okay, you can do it. It'll be in the middle of the night here for a lot of these events, right? A lot of them are literally at 3 a.m. Because that's 5 p.m. over in Tokyo. But you can stream it to your computer, to your iPad, your phone, whatever you want. And so that's been my go-to if I want to watch things live. Now, there's another link. I'll send this one to you, Cosi, too. If you prefer to watch your TV at a decent hour, and you want to watch it on your television set, you want to watch it on cable, then, NBC does on tape delay. They rebroadcast every night. They have a certain amount on NBC main network. Some of them are on NBC Sports Network. Some of them are on the Olympic Channel. And so this link that Cosi just posted, that's where you can find out what the regular broadcast schedule is going to be. Some of that coverage is live. Most of it is rebroadcast. But the other nice thing about that is that you get the interviews, right? Yes. You get the athlete profiles, right? So if they've gone out and interviewed Matt Stutzman in his garage, where you can see some of his cars that he builds, for example, you get that on the TV. You don't get that on the live stream, right? The live stream is you just get the competition itself.
Just
so
those
two links you can find almost anything that you want, and you have to figure out how to use the schedules, but it's pretty intuitive.
So guys, I was going to do a Cosi poll tonight. I want to know, how many of you played sports in high school? Played any kind of a team sport? What was your sport that you used to play that you currently do? Put it in the comment section, because I know there's a lot of active folks here on my website. Even if you did, kiddie soccer, I want to hear, what were the sports that you've played during your life, especially the team sports? So guys, moving on, we're going to move on a little bit now to the track and field. And I've never done track and field as a sport, but I love to run, and I love teaching my patients how to run. So this for me is always just a fascination, where I'm just looking at the TV and just watching everybody's gait mechanics. And we've got a lot of really interesting, really cool people showing up on the scene. But as always, I like my useless Jeopardy factoid. So here's a couple on the track and field. The USA, guys, we are leading with 375 gold medals won in track and field. Maria Scuti from Italy, she has won the most athletic medals with 11, including 9 golds. So there's just a couple of interesting little tidbits here and there. Let's see. William Mays used to play baseball and track.
He's Willie Mays. Of course he played baseball.
Right? We got Randy Italiano with softball. Jody did basketball, softball, and tennis, college and high school. Nice. Patrick did lax martial arts and do traditional archery for years now. What kind of a bow do you use, Patrick? So Randy says, I can't now with no arm. So I want to hear more about the sport. Larry, did you play any sports?
Yeah, I played basketball and football my freshman year.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, and then I went into the band.
The band is where you have a lot of fun. I will say that.
Yeah,
band is a lot of fun. Awesome. Well, my passion, I love swimming. That was my main sport. Tennis and running. Those are my 3 biggies right there. So let's talk a little bit about the people to watch in track and field. So first we've got the Jared Wallace and Jonathan Gore. They are running the 100 meter and 200 meter sprints in the T64 class. Larry, tell us a little bit about Jared and Jonathan's story. That's
sure. Yeah. I mean, the U.S. track team has a lot of great stories. Cosi and I figured we can only cover certain ones. So this is a really nice story. Jared Wallace ran college track, and was at the 2016 Rio Paralympics, and then was a big star at the 2017 World Athletic Championships. So really kind of made a name for himself as a para-athlete. Meanwhile, Jonathan Gore was at this same time that Jared Wallace was achieving all of this. Jonathan Gore was an able-bodied college track star at Chapman University, which I think is Division II, maybe Division III. Okay. And he then graduated and sustained an injury, a traumatic injury that led to the amputation of his right leg below the knee. All of a sudden, he went from being, a college track star who, wasn't sure what his next move was going to be, to now I'm an amputee. And he reached out to Jared Wallace on, I think it was Instagram, one of his social channels, right? Because he's like, oh, I know this guy. He's the guy who's winning all the medals in the World Championship. I'll just reach out to him. And Jared Wallace responded. he's like, yeah, I'll help this guy out. And they neither one knew each other. They have become like really tight. Jared Wallace helped Jonathan Gore figure out, number one, what do you need to do in terms of rehab to get back to where, you have the right foundation to then, become an elite para athlete. How do you get the equipment? Where do you find the coaching? Where can you get into competition, to kind of build yourself up? And so Gore made his very first official appearance in a para track meet earlier this year, just in April, and blew away the field in the 100, including Jared. And then in the Olympic national trials, Paralympic national trials, the two of them finished 1-2 in the 100 meters. I think that they were 2-1. They reversed the order in 200. In terms of their times, or any time that any athlete around the world has run this year, they're both in the top 3 in both of those events. So they are both very, very serious podium contenders, and it's a nice, again, it tells you that community that sports really create for people with disabilities, right?
Absolutely.
All of a sudden, Jonathan Gore found his family, found his tribe on the athletic field, and here he is in Tokyo now with a chance maybe to go home with a medal. And so, yeah, those two, it's a really interesting story.
Love it. And we got Leanne here who says she did shot put, volleyball, and basketball. Daniel says, anyone who says that marching band is not a sport, never tried it. I will agree with you on that one. I will wholeheartedly
appreciate that. Yes, thank you.
Jody says, now I golf and swim. In high school, I was a softball state champion. Johnny says, I was a nerd geek from geekdom. I was not an athlete at all. Well, Johnny, judging from your post, you are more than making up for it. I go skiing. I go do every single athletic thing out there based on your posting right now. Steven, roll Tide. Joe was in band and football at the same time, and I would play the trombone in my football uniform at halftime. We've got a lot of athletes here on board. Jody with a basketball scholarship. All right.
I'm impressed with Joe. That is definitely impressive.
And Randy, you will see that there are many arm amputees in swimming. There was one gentleman that I go, this is amazing. He's bilateral above the arm, and he is also missing one leg, and he was swimming.
And Randy,
platform. I didn't catch his name. I saw him in the trials, and he wasn't USA. I don't know if he was Brazil swimming, and he did amazing.
And Randy, there's also quite a number of track athletes. There are whole classifications for upper limb amputees. So I'm going to throw a couple names out for you. Josh Sinamo. It's basically spell cinnamon, but take the N off of the end, and that's the guy's name, Sinamo. He's the world record holder in the shot put. He is an upper limb congenital amputee, and he, like Matt Stutzman, he's accomplished everything in his sport except a gold medal in the Paralympics, and so he's someone to keep an eye out for as an upper limb amputee. There's also a newcomer in the track and field in the sprint category. Her name's Danny Aravich. And she is, I can't remember if she's congenital or acquired, but she is not only debuting in the Summer Olympics now as a track athlete, but then in 6 months, she's going to debut as a cross-country skier in Beijing in the Winter Olympics. Oh, wow. So she's like training. I can't even imagine what her training schedule must be like. But there's two off the top of my head for you, and there's quite a number more. In fact, if you go to our website, I'll plug our website. We have a whole section at livingwithamplitude.com. And then let's see, I think it's our Meet the Athletes page. So if you just go there and go to the upper left, click on Paralympics, drop down the menu and click on Meet the Athletes, we have a little thumbnail bio of every amputee that's competing over in Tokyo.
There you have it.
Yeah.
There you
go. You'll be able to find out there.
Frank, compadre, glad you could join in. Randy, I don't know the name of the young man that I saw swimming. I will be keeping my eyes open for him, though. I saw him in the trials when he was swimming.
You're talking about Cosi. I'm going to see if I can look him up.
And I remember I saw you saw his coach lifting him on to the diving platform, and I was just sitting there going, "How is it?" And he just took off. He just took off. So we got lots more here, guys. So we've got Chuck. I'm glad you could join us because we're getting to the real good stuff now. The next people in the track and field that just I love this because I've been following him on accident on my social media between Sam Grew and his protege, 16-year-old Ezra Freck. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
And some of you actually mentioned earlier, if you recognize the name Ezra Freck, he is this 16 years old, y'all. 16 years old. And this kid is ripped and he is tearing it up. If you recognize his name, it's because his family is the founder of Angel City Sports. Did I get it right, Larry?
Correct. Yep.
And a couple of you mentioned that earlier, an adaptive sports organization. And guys, if you go to the NBC Peacock streaming on your TV, they did a whole special. Kelly Clark. There's an interview with him and Kelly Clark.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I get the name right? With Kelly Clark, and Ezra's on there talking about Angel City Sports and his own story. So
yeah.
And that's another protege student teacher relationship there where they're now competing with each other.
Similar to Jared and Jonathan Gore. Yeah. By the way, Randy, you've got it right. Just take the last N off of his name, and that's how you spell it. Sinamo. Josh Sinamo.
There you go.
So Ezra and Sam Grew. Sam Grew is the current reigning world record holder in the high jump. And he is a unilateral above knee amputee. He lost his limb as a teenager to sarcoma. So meanwhile, Ezra Freck, who is a congenital above knee amputee, he's an interesting one. Unlike the three other track athletes we've mentioned, Ezra is the only one we've mentioned who kind of grew up dreaming of being in the Paralympics, right?
Yes.
The other three, they either dreamed of being in the Olympics or they dreamed of being in the National Football League or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. They weren't thinking about adaptive athletics until they acquired a limb difference. Ezra Freck always grew up wanting to be a Paralympian ever since he was a kid. So when he saw Sam Grew 5 years ago, and Ezra's just, an 11-year-old pipsqueak, right? It's hard to imagine 5 years, such a change. He goes from literally a boy into a young man. He sees Sam Grew at the Paralympics in Rio, and he's like, that's what I want to do. And a similar relationship developed where, big brother, little brother, and they are both medal contenders. I think that at the Paralympic trials, they were separated by half a meter, right? So Ezra has really, I don't think he's ever beaten Sam in a competition, but they are very neck and neck in terms of the levels that they're jumping at. And so, it would be really, I think, for both of them, incredibly special if they could both be on the podium together. It would be a really, really nice ending to, or at least a nice way station on their journey, which probably will continue for another cycle or two. But anyway.
It's amazing to see this young man. So I follow his dad on Facebook, and his dad has obviously been posting about his training and just even talking about before he headed over to Tokyo, adjusting his sleep schedule. So going to sleep, at some crazy hour, to adjust to Tokyo. And I was like, 16-year-old having this level of discipline, guys. I mean, it's just amazing. It's where you really see that wake-up call of saying these are elite athletes. They train like elite athletes. They go for blood, guts, and glory like elite athletes. I mean, they are. And another side note that I was so happy to hear, Olympians now will be paid the equal amount of prize money as their Olympic counterparts. So there used to be, for gold, you get a certain amount. Gold, I think it's $37,500. Silver is another amount. Bronze medal. And this is the first time that Paralympians will make the same amount as Olympians. And to me, that's just like a real, finally, they have arrived.
Yeah. So we have some content about that backstory at our Paralympics website. It so happens it was an amputee Paralympian who helped drive that that change. Her name's Katie Holloway. She's the captain of the women's sitting volleyball team. Do you know her?
I know that name. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I saw the recognition. Yeah, she's very very big, very impressive. She led the team to 2 silvers and a gold in the last 3 cycles. And so at any rate, she was one of the leaders helping to kind of twist arms within the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee to say it is not okay to pay us 20% of what the Olympic athletes make.
Yeah,
what
because
it had been until a couple of years ago. Yeah,
they're paying for training costs. They're paying for putting their lives on hold. And you see, there's a couple of folks I follow on Instagram that they've said, guys, you know, we were in the Paralympics and we went broke because we didn't have the sponsors. We were training just like our elite counterparts, our Olympic counterparts, but we weren't receiving the support. And I just thought, that's so sad. So this year to see, you know, to see that they're getting equal pay, to see companies like the Toyotas, the Nikes, and really getting in there and sponsoring these Paralympic athletes. How many of you watched that beautiful commercial? And that by far is my favorite commercial of all time. With
Jessica Long one.
Jessica Long Toyota commercial, the way they told her story. Wow. Yeah. So to finally be getting this recognition is wonderful. So we're going to move along to my favorite, and I saved the best for last, and that is swimming. Swimming. So guys, in swimming, right, in London 2012, we saw the most participants in Paralympic swimming with 604 swimmers. So a few more stats. USA leading with the gold medals, right, with 268 golds. Great Britain at 217 and Netherlands with 180. It didn't make a cut in this one. Just as an interesting, check this out, guys. A gal by the name of Trisha Zorn. She is currently the most decorated Paralympic swimmer with 46 medals spread across 7 games. Guys, think about that. That's over 28 years of competing at an elite level. Just as a comparison, guys, the Michael Phelps, Mr. Adonis God, you know, of swimming, he swam 4 or 5 Olympics, right? Trisha swam 7. Okay, sorry. That's my like geek coming out right now. All right. So people to watch in swimming, and everybody knows about Jessica Long. Some of you may have heard also the name Morgan Stickney. So these two are going to be going head to head. They are both bilateral amputees, and they're both going to be competing in the 400-meter freestyle as an S8 class. And they both currently have the top times, right? So Jessica's kind of our veteran Olympian. She's got quite a few Olympic medals under her belt. And Morgan Stickney is kind of our newcomer. So it's just, and they're both, it's going to be cool. It's going to be cool.
Jessica is the single most decorated meaning she's won the most medals of any Paralympian on this year's team. She's got 23 in her career. 13 of those are golds. So yeah, she is the kind of superstar, right? She's the Tom Brady, if you will. And then, you know, Morgan Stickney is like Patrick Mahomes, maybe, right? Okay. And you know, again, there's a contrast here. Jessica's a congenital amputee from infancy. She's been a bilateral amputee ever since she can remember. Morgan Stickney, by contrast, is acquired bilateral amputee. She was on track as recently as 2017 to be competing in Tokyo as an Olympian on the able-bodied side. And she had been having strange pains in her legs. Long story short, she ended up being diagnosed with a vascular disorder that required amputation first of her, let me see if I get the order right. I believe she had her left leg amputated first, and then she got back in the pool and was training as a unilateral amputee, and then injured her other leg, same condition. So she then had to go back after, you know, going through rehabilitation for one leg, and she had a year later the other leg removed. And it was only because of the COVID delay she was able to compete in these games. She wouldn't have had time to get back in shape had they held them on schedule a year ago. But she is a phenomenal swimmer, a phenomenal athlete. And, so she and Jessica are, it's a mutual admiration society, but you can bet that they are very serious about beating each other. And that's perhaps, that's one of the maybe 2 or 3 single most compelling events for me personally to watch. I really want to watch that race.
That one, and my other personal favorite, because she's been a guest on this show multiple times. I'm going to give her the Rookie of the Year award because, it's my show and I can do that. Haven Shepherd. She is just a bundle of joy just to watch her, guys. If you've never seen her on my show, you need to. You'll walk away with a smile on your face. She is doing her very first Paralympics, and her story's been amazing to watch because she's only 18. She's 18, a young herself. So when she first started training 5 years ago, she started training basically as a 13-year-old. And obviously with the delay with COVID, in teenage years, that's a huge delay for a teenager, especially in the world of athletics. So she made it. She qualified. She is going to be swimming the 200-meter IM as an SM8 and 100-meter breaststroke as an SB7. So that's going to be an exciting one to watch too.
Yeah, and I don't think she's considered a favorite to win a medal, but she certainly could. We saw a lot of surprises in the Olympics, and so she's. I think really, given how young she is, it would be a great accomplishment if she just makes it out of the heats, out of the qualifying heats, and gets into the finals, gets into the medal race. And I think that's well within reach for her, for both of those. She did fantastic a couple years ago at the Pan American Games down in Lima, Peru. She was a real standout there, won a number of medals. And so, she's, as you said, her personality is so compelling, and she's just an incredibly positive person. I've been fortunate to meet her myself because I'm in Denver. I can get down to the training complex in Colorado Springs pretty easily. And so I met her down there just one time, but was really impressed. She was only 16 at that time, and but wise beyond her years. And I think she also, judging from her Instagram feed, she can either be grown up or she can, be a kind of, a party girl too. It looks like she knows how to have fun.
Teenager, because that's what she is. Yes. Ben Gregory, you've just given me the most beautiful segue, because this is the part of tonight's talk that I was most excited, besides swimming, to talk about. So just a quick story. I was watching so when Olympics are on, whether it's Olympics or Paralympics, that's what's on my TV. We don't watch a lot of TV in this house, but the TV will be on for that. So during the swimming trials, right, for the Paralympics, my kids are on the swim team, so they're plunked in front of the TV, and we're seeing the lineup. And immediately my kids, I have 4 kids, guys. For those of you who know, I have four beautiful children. They start asking all these questions. They're saying, Mom, why is it that the person who's missing one arm is competing against the person who's missing 2 legs but has both arms? And why is it that that person doesn't look like they have any kind of visible disability? Why are they competing? And why is it that that person has a stick that they're touching their head in the pool for the visually impaired? So my kids were asking all these really great questions. And a part of me was just like, wow, there's not a whole lot of explanations about this. How do they do these classifications among the sports? And what is it that qualifies you to enter the Paralympics? So as my kids mentioned, they said, well, that person, their disability or their impairment isn't quite as visible. Okay. So I did a little research on it because I'm a nerd like that. So guys, a big thing with the International Paralympic Committee is they try to even out the playing field. So in the same way that many sports, such as wrestling, for example, they will divide the sport up into categories, including sex, weight, and age category. They try to develop similar categories in the Paralympics to put everybody on an even playing field. So they're going to be looking things like impaired muscle power. They're going to look to see if the athlete has impaired passive range of motion, limb deficiency, short stature, okay, hypertonia, things that you see with cerebral palsy, spina bifida, traumatic brain injury, ataxia, which is basically a damage to your balance and coordination from a brain or nervous system injury, visual impairment, and now we have intellectual impairment, okay? So in order to become a Paralympian, not only do you have to demonstrate that you do in fact have this impairment, but you have to demonstrate how the impairment that you have affects the sport that you're doing. Okay. And it's done with these classifications. All right. So you get qualified, you say, yep, you're going to be a Paralympian. So in the sports, you'll notice that each sport has a classification. So for track and field, it starts with the letter T and then a number that follows it. With swimming, it starts with S, right? And a number that follows it. So let's just do a for example. In track and field, and Larry, I lost my notes for a moment, so let's see if I can do this from memory.
Okay.
Someone who is a T61 is a bilateral above the knee amputee. Did I get that right? Sweet. Okay, 1 for 1. Someone who's a T62 is a bilateral below the knee amputee.
Right again.
Someone who is a T63 is going to be an above the knee amputee on one side. And someone who is a T64 is a T64 is a below the knee on one side. So guys, it goes by number. As the number decreases, the person has a bigger impairment. So the T64 is a below the knee compared to someone who has a bilateral at a T61. And that's kind of uniform across the sports. So you're going to see the letter that represents the sport and then the number, okay? So you can look at it in one of two ways. The higher their number, the more of an advantage they have in terms of their impairment. The lower the number, the greater the impairment. Does that make sense, guys? Can you guys give me a thumbs up if that's making sense? So obviously when they're putting these competitors together, they're going to put them in competition with the same level number. That's what they're trying to do. So
just to throw some names out that we've been discussing, for example, right? So in the 100 meter race in T64, that's where Jared Wallace and Jonathan Gore will compete. They are both unilateral below knee amputees. They'll be in the T64 race. They'll race head to head, and they'll race for a single medal or set of medals. Yep. Then T63, that's Ezra Freck's designation. He is a T63 athlete because he is a unilateral above knee amputee. And in addition to the high jump that we mentioned, he's also a long jumper, and he will be running in the 100 meters in T63. So he will run against the other T63s in his 100-meter classification race for a totally separate gold medal.
Yes.
Then to throw out yet another person who a lot of people will recognize, Hunter Woodhall. He is a very famous Paralympic sprinter. He's super famous on social media. He's been on Ellen DeGeneres, yada, yada. He was a Division I scholarship track star as a bilateral below knee amputee. He's in class T62. So he won't race against any of the unilaterals, right? He will race only against other bilateral below knees. And he is another one of the big stars of these Paralympics that, you know, will probably get a lot of FaceTime on NBC and certainly on all of his social channels.
Yes. And there's a fantastic question, Joe. And this is a very good question. Joe is asking, and by the way, guys, I am broadcasting to my YouTube channel. So Joe, thank you for tuning in from there. Joe is asking, can that number change if a person gets stronger somehow, thus not being quite as handicapped? And the answer is no. Here's why. Okay. The whole point of that classification is it demonstrates that they have to overcome this level of impairment. How do they overcome it? Is with training. Okay. That's where when they put everybody on an equal playing field in terms of their impairment, then it's up to them as the athlete, right, to overcome that. So if you compare it to the Olympians, right, they're not put into any, it's basically their training. Their training is what's going to give them that gold medal compared to that silver medal, okay, because they're on even playing field. So the same thing with the Paralympics. Once they're put into their classification, if they get stronger and they're able to overcome that impairment, that means they get the medal. That's what that means. So,
however, you can go the opposite direction.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So for the some of the visually impaired athletes have progressive sight loss, right? That over time, they may start out where they have, impaired like sight in the middle of their field of vision, but they have some peripheral vision, and then that may, over time become that they can see shadows and shapes, and so you can then change classifications depending if you lose functionality. Yeah.
And then what's interesting, and this is something that I just kind of been digging and reading, because every sport, guys, every sport has their own rules, and we're going to talk a little bit about the differences because it's kind of cool. So, for example, in swimming, right, for the visually impaired, and this is where my kids were watching and they were saying, what's with the stick, right? So one of the adaptations for the swimmers who are visually impaired is that they have the guide stick to tap on their head as they're getting close to the wall so that they can count their strokes, do the flip turn, hopefully without smashing into the wall, and keeping their stride going. Because those flip turns, any of you guys out there who are swimmers or swim fans, you know that those flip turns are extremely important and they can make or break a race. Anyways, so for the swimmers who are visually impaired, they try to actually put them all on the level playing field. Those who have a little bit of vision, they are told to wear dark goggles to try to even the playing field out with their competitors who are more visually impaired. So you can see with the different sports how they try to make it as even as possible. Now, what's interesting, guys, is each impairment will score differently in different sports. And this is what I found to be interesting. So, for example, somebody who is of short stature as a swimmer will be classified lower than a person who is visually impaired. Meaning, in the pool, the person with short stature is considered to be at a greater disadvantage, that they have a greater impairment compared to the person who is visually impaired. But when you transfer that to track and field, it's switched. The person who is visually impaired scores lower. So they have a greater impairment on track and field compared to the person with short stature. So I found that to be interesting that they look at it sport by sport and what are the physical requirements for every sport and how each impairment is affected in each sport. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. It's very, very hard to keep straight when you first begin, but stick with it. It's worth keeping it straight. And, again, it comes out logically when you think of having athletes compete against each other that are well matched physically, and that what's being tested is the sort of, like you said, training, the determination, whatever, as opposed to someone simply not having the range of motion in their shoulder that somebody else does, right? And so, the swimmer, if you can't rotate your shoulder, then you are not going to be able to compete with someone who has full range of motion in that joint.
Right. And it was interesting, just for example, so guys, you can look up the profiles of the individual athletes. So I was looking up the profile on Jessica Long, for example, and it actually tells you what is the impairments that classifies them as a Paralympic athlete. So it was really interesting. Again, physical therapy, put my physical therapy hat on. And it was talking about how she qualifies because of overall impaired muscle power, and her ability to move in the water is impaired. And I thought that was very interesting. And I was starting to think, I was like, as a swimmer, she has a huge advantage that she has both of her arms, right? And she has this beautiful musculature in her back that you can tell from years of training. But her two biggest disadvantages, especially in the freestyle, for example, is going to be the flip turn, right? So those of you who are swimmers, those of you who watch the competition, that flip turn can make or break your race. And in her case, in a freestyle, she is not going to be able to push off from the wall because she can't push off from her residual limbs, right? So there's a huge disadvantage for her there. And the other obvious disadvantage is without having her feet to act basically as paddles, she's having to utilize her glutes that much more to power her through the water and her arms. Now, in breaststroke, right, it's a little different. She might actually score higher in her classification because for breaststroke, your power not only comes from your arm pull, but it also comes from your thigh muscles, which hers are intact. So in that case, she's going to have a bigger advantage in a breaststroke compared to freestyle.
And by the way, before we leave swimming, I realized I looked up a question that had been hanging out there and I never gave the answer. I think it was Carolyn who had asked, about bilateral upper limb swimming person who you'd seen in the trials.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure the person you're talking about is named Mohammed Abbas Karimi. His last name is spelled Karimi.
Okay.
And actually, I'll send you this link, Cosi, and you can post it. But he is on the Paralympic refugee team. So he's not actually on the U.S. team. He is a refugee from either Syria or Iraq. And so there is a Paralympic refugee team this year of individuals who are exiled from their home country. And so they've kind of formed a small team. There's only about half a dozen people on it, and he's one of them. He actually lives in Florida now. He trains in Florida. And he, okay, I got this link for you. We just had a small item on him. And, but wow. He is a congenital upper limb amputee. So he's never known anything else. And he has always been a swimmer from a very young age. Anyway, that's the individual. He was in Minneapolis for the trials. He was qualifying not for Team USA, but qualifying for that refugee team.
And with everything going on today, that refugee team is extra special.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, no kidding.
Wow. All right, guys. So we've talked a lot about the different classifications, and I want to talk a little bit about where you can watch. Where can we watch it? We've talked about the app on the phone that can be downloaded, and me being the soccer or swim mom, not soccer mom, swim mom, I'm in my car. That's what I'm going to be doing, is watching it on my app on my phone, the NBC Peacock app, and also in the streaming app. They do have one right there. Where else, Larry? You mentioned one other place.
Well, it's the live stream on NBC Olympics. So if you go to their website or you get the NBC Sports app, either of those, you can stream any event. And so I think I sent you that yes. Post. It's just NBCOlympics.com.
Yep.
And
listing everything again right now.
You can choose what you want to. It's not that one. It's the shorter link. Just everything. There you go. Yeah, that top link there. If you go to that, you can see everything that's being broadcast and streamed right at the moment. Right. So there might be 4 different events going on at one time, and you can drop in and watch a little bit of archery and see how that's going. Then you can check out and see if there's a rowing event going on. You can check out the para rowing, and then maybe you watch a quarter of a wheelchair basketball game. I mean, it's a smorgasbord, and so that's why I like it. But as I was saying earlier in the show, if you really like the personality profiles and the athlete profiles, the only way you get those is at the second link down there, which is for the broadcast coverage, right? That's on NBC, right, the main network, or NBC Sports Network, one of their cable channels, or the Olympic Channel, another cable channel. So if you want to get more of that kind of personality and that flavor, then you should watch there. And that's a mixture of live and taped broadcasting. So, but it really, those 2 links, you can pretty much get anything that you want there.
Sounds good. All right, guys, we have talked your ears off about Paralympics, but we're not done, because next week we're going to come back after we've had a week of watching everything, and we're going to talk about who's who did what, who didn't do what, and who's going home. So we're going to talk about all that kind of fun stuff next week's show. I do want to take the time to thank Larry and Amplitude, not only for being on the show tonight, but for also featuring me a couple times in the magazine. That was absolutely wonderful, and I appreciate the support. So Larry, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Absolutely. It's really great to be on the show. Thanks for having me. It's really fun to talk sports with you. And, I haven't really worked this in, but this is to us, this is really about more than sport. It's about community, and it's about, a cultural shift of, America becoming a little bit more aware of, who amputees are and what limb difference is, and getting kind of perspective on it that they've never had before. And so that's why our magazine is putting so much focus on it, because we think the potential long-range significance is really great.
Yep. And Ben, Gregory, couldn't agree with you more. All right,
Yeah,
guys.
totally agree. 100% agree. You haven't watched yet. Van Gregory is telling 100% truth there. They are some bad.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And we're gonna have a lot more to talk about a week from now.
Hardcore. These are hardcore athletes. These are serious athletes, and they get after it, and it's really entertaining.
Yep. All right, guys. So with that, we're going to sign off. As always, thank you guys for letting me be a part of your lives this evening. We will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. God bless, guys. Bye.
Thanks.